My name is Grace Donovan, and I never imagined my career would implode in front of 20 colleagues and a projector screen. One second, I was ready to present my quarterly growth strategy, and the next, I was being told my position was terminated, effective immediately. Martin didn't flinch when he said it, didn't lower his voice, didn't even blink. I remember gripping the edge of the table to steady myself, fingers cold, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear the silence that followed. Everyone just stared, frozen like a moment, pulled out of time. No one spoke up. No one asked why. And for a few long seconds, I couldn't either. The folder in my lap still held charts proving we'd outperformed every other region by 22%. My brain couldn't compute how we got from a record-breaking quarter to this. I looked around the room, searching for even a flicker of doubt in someone's eyes, a raised eyebrow, anything. But all I saw was discomfort. Avoided eye contact, the shuffle of a chair, a cough. I don't know if they were scared, complicit, or just too stunned to speak. I should have said something. I should have asked why, or demanded an explanation, or at least stood up. But in that moment, I felt hollow. Not angry, not defensive, just erased. 6 years of building something I believed in. 60-hour weeks, holiday emails, weekends spent cleaning up others' mistakes. And in a single, controlled moment, it all unraveled with a sentence I hadn't seen coming. Maybe the worst part wasn't the termination. It was the performance. The way Martin's voice dropped to that calculated, disappointed tone. The way he paced around the table like a judge reading a sentence, knowing full well I wouldn't interrupt. I didn't cry. Not there, not then. But the silence from the people who once cheered my ideas that stayed with me longer than the words ever did. That morning, I thought I was walking into a meeting to celebrate success. Instead, I walked into an ambush, and the only person who tried to stop it was my intern. I started at the front desk, answering phones and scheduling meetings in a cubicle that barely fit a chair. I was 24, fresh out of grad school, with student loans, and a head full of ambition. I didn't complain, didn't coast, just listened more than I spoke, and watched how everything worked or didn't. It didn't take long to notice the gaps. Clients weren't leaving because of price or competition. They were leaving because they felt unseen, like just another transaction in a system too rushed to care. So I started building something different. Quietly at first. Notes scribbled between calls. Spreadsheets at night. A way to track client touchpoints that didn't feel robotic. A system that mapped not just their needs, but what made them stay. My supervisor let me test it on a dead zone territory that no one wanted. I spent weeks rebuilding trust, learning names, remembering birthdays, and sending handwritten follow-ups. Within 6 months, the region flipped. Client retention jumped by 30%. By the end of the year, it was outperforming all other divisions. That's when Martin noticed me. Back then, he called me a rising star, said I had a gift for connection and a mind for strategy. He brought me into bigger meetings, gave me space to pilot my framework in 2 more regions. I refined the system each time. It wasn't magic. It was just a personalized strategy over boilerplate scripts. But it worked. Clients stayed. Revenue climbed. Word got out. 3 years in, I was leading 3 territories, all using variations of what I'd created. Martin told me the company was watching, that I was building something real, and I believed him. Then came the shift. It was slow, subtle. He started using the term collaborative framework in meetings. Not mine. Not even our strategy. Just this vague term that made it sound like the idea had floated out of a team brainstorm instead of 3 years of my life. Then he began standing closer to the projector during presentations. He'd field questions I was ready to answer. When clients praised our retention rates, he'd say, "Yes, that's part of the leadership vision I've been guiding." I'd smile through it, pretending it didn't sting. At first, I thought I was imagining it. But soon, I wasn't getting invited to the strategy roundtables. Key accounts were reassigned. My metrics started slipping not because of performance, but because I no longer controlled the areas I'd built. The final straw came when I saw a company-wide memo crediting a new internal initiative modeled directly after my client approach as an executive-level achievement under Martin's direction. My name wasn't mentioned once. I didn't say anything right away. I kept telling myself the work spoke for itself. That eventually, someone would notice. But what I didn't realize then was that silence is easy to overwrite. And the louder voices always rewrite the story first. By the time I understood what was happening, the story wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to Martin. At least, that's what the rest of the company thought. The room was quiet. Too quiet. I could still hear the tick of someone's watch and the faint hum of the projector, even though the screen had long gone dark. Martin's words hung in the air like smoke, toxic and lingering. Be gone by noon. His voice had that clipped finality people use when they want to appear professional while twisting the knife. Then, a chair scraped against the floor. It came from the far end of the table where the junior staff usually sat, silent and half-forgotten. Claire, the intern I'd barely had time to mentor over the past few months, stood up with her laptop clutched tight to her chest. She looked nervous, but something in her eyes was steady. Martin didn't even try to hide his annoyance. He waved her off with a flick of his fingers, told her this wasn't appropriate, that she needed to sit down. But Claire didn't sit. She walked slowly toward the head of the table, every step deliberate. She placed her laptop in front of him and turned the screen around so the whole room could see. There was a pause, a breath. Then Martin leaned in to look. His face drained of color instantly. His body shifted back, one hand bracing on the table. The screen showed internal emails, calendar logs, and performance reports, all with metadata and timestamps. Claire had organized it all into a clean, brutal timeline. My framework, my strategy, my results, all stripped of my name and relabeled under Martin's projects. The room was still in shock when she said it. 5 words that landed like a lightning strike. She's right behind you. Martin spun around so fast, he nearly tripped on the edge of the conference table, and there she was. Evelyn Grant, the CEO of Grant Strategic, one of the most powerful women in the industry. Her presence filled the doorway like it belonged to her. And maybe it always had. No one had known she was coming. Her visit wasn't scheduled until next week. But she'd arrived early, intentionally, just in time to witness everything. Evelyn walked in without a word, her eyes scanning the room like she was taking inventory. Her assistant followed, holding a sleek leather portfolio. Claire stepped back to stand beside me, her breathing even. My own chest felt like it might collapse. Evelyn's voice was calm, almost gentle. She said she had come specifically to meet the person behind the territory strategy that had caught her attention months ago. Her eyes landed on me, not Martin, me. Martin tried to recover. He reached out to shake her hand, threw out a nervous welcome, and said something about unexpected visits. She didn't shake his hand, didn't smile, didn't look at him again. Instead, she nodded at me, then looked at Claire, and said she wanted both of us to join her in a private meeting. There was no argument, no protocol, just authority. In under 5 minutes, the entire tone of the room flipped. Martin's control evaporated. His power cracked like thin glass under a spotlight. And the intern he'd ignored? She had just delivered the opening move in a game he didn't even know he was playing. Denver wasn't supposed to change anything. It was just another industry conference. Another hotel ballroom filled with stiff name tags, lukewarm coffee, and half-listening executives waiting for their flights home. I was scheduled to speak on the last afternoon, a small panel on client engagement strategies. My expectations were low. I'd planned to present the framework I'd spent years refining, the one that turned struggling territories into the company's top performers. Nothing flashy. Just the work. Just the truth. The room filled up more than I expected. People actually took notes. A few asked follow-ups. But it was the woman in the 3rd row who stayed after and changed everything. She was composed, thoughtful, asked questions that went deeper than surface-level metrics. When she handed me her card and I saw the name Evelyn Grant, my hands trembled. I knew exactly who she was. Everyone did. A legend, a force. She said my approach felt refreshingly human in an industry drowning in automation, that companies were forgetting clients were people, not data points. Her words felt like oxygen. When I got back to the office the next week, I told Martin everything. I was excited, nervous even. I thought he'd be proud. Instead, he got quiet. His smile didn't reach his eyes. He asked exactly what I'd shared. Which documents? How much detail? Then he said, next time, I should run those conversations through him. Those leadership-level connections needed careful handling. I didn't push back. I wanted to believe he was protecting the company, protecting me. Days later, Evelyn's chief of staff reached out to schedule a follow-up. I forwarded the email to Martin, just like he asked. He replied immediately. He'd handle it. I was told to focus on my regions. That was when things started to shift. He began joining my client calls, sitting in on meetings he never used to attend. Suddenly, when I presented results, he reframed them as part of our shared strategic vision. The language changed. So did the credit. He started calling my framework a team initiative. He said he'd guided its evolution. When I brought it up gently, he brushed it off. Told me not to get caught up in ownership. That impact mattered more than ego. And I believed him, for longer than I should have. I didn't see the pattern yet. I didn't realize he was slowly rewriting my contributions into his story. Denver had opened a door I wasn't meant to walk through alone, and Martin made sure I didn't, at least, not on my own terms. After the meeting, when the dust had barely settled and people had begun filing out in silence, Claire asked if we could talk alone. She didn't look like an intern anymore. There was something older in her face, something quietly resolved. We sat in the break room, fluorescent lights buzzing above us. She took a breath and said Claire wasn't her full name, that her legal name was Claire Voss. I recognized the last name immediately. Voss, her sister, Peyton Voss, had been a brilliant strategist in a rival firm years ago. She was up for a senior promotion when suddenly, quietly, she was pushed out. Rumors swirled. Nothing ever confirmed. But the one constant in the background was Martin. He'd consulted for that firm during the same quarter. Peyton disappeared. Claire said she'd been 17 when it happened. She remembered how her sister stopped talking about work, how she threw out all her awards, erased her LinkedIn, and moved back home. Claire said the worst part wasn't the silence. It was watching someone who once lit up every room fall completely dim. When she learned I was working under Martin and that my name was disappearing from the strategy I'd built, it felt like watching history repeat. She applied for the internship that week. She didn't even want to work in corporate strategy. She just needed access. It took her months to collect what she needed. Emails, presentation timestamps, screenshots from internal folders before they were scrubbed. She worked late after everyone left, copied backup drives no one tracked, and built a case strong enough to be heard. She said she didn't do it for revenge. Not exactly. She did it for all the women who were told to be team players while someone else did their work. For her sister. For me. For every story erased before it had a chance to begin. I couldn't speak. My throat felt tight in a way that had nothing to do with anger and everything to do with being seen. Claire hadn't just saved me from being silenced. She had turned her pain into proof, into action, into something no one could ignore. Her internship was ending the following week. She told me that too. She hadn't planned to stay longer. She'd done what she came to do. And when I asked what she wanted next, she smiled and said maybe she'd finally apply for a job she actually wanted. But first, she needed to make sure the right people saw what really happened. This time, from the beginning, the office felt quieter after it all came out, like the air had shifted, like the building finally exhaled something it had been holding too long. That afternoon, Evelyn asked to speak with me in private. Her voice was calm, her eyes steady. She said she'd followed my work long before Denver and that she had a place for me on her executive team if I was ready to leave the past behind. Before I could respond, another message came through. This time from Harold Klein, the CEO of my current company. Suddenly, after months of silence, they wanted to talk. Said they were reconsidering recent decisions, that perhaps my departure had been premature. It was the kind of power I'd never had before, not in this way, not with two doors opening at once. I went home early, turned off my phone, and sat with it all. There was no rush. For the first time, in a long time, I could breathe before choosing. That evening, Claire knocked gently on my door. She handed me a small USB drive, neatly labeled and wrapped in a folder. Her expression was steady, but her hands trembled slightly when she passed it to me. She said the drive held 5 years' worth of data. Every instance where Martin had manipulated credit, reassigned accounts, or suppressed internal feedback. Screenshots, call logs, and backdated documents. Everything. Some involved me. Some involved others. All of it connected. She told me I didn't have to use it, that the truth was mine to carry or release, that it was time someone had the choice. I didn't answer right away. I just sat with the weight of what that meant. I had been fighting for a voice, and now I had proof. I had options. I had power. I opened my laptop and slid the USB in, not out of revenge, not even to win, but because some truths deserve a system that protects them, not one that hides them. That night, I wrote 2 emails, one to Harold, one to Evelyn. Both were honest. Only one led to a conversation. The other led to a board meeting. Sometimes, justice doesn't come with fireworks or applause. Sometimes, it starts with a file folder, a quiet intern, and someone finally listening. I didn't come back to beg. I came back with a list. When Harold called and asked what it would take for me to consider staying, I told him we'd need more than an apology and a seat at the table. I wanted structure, real change. Not just for me, but for everyone who'd been overlooked, while keeping the company afloat. First, I demanded transparency. Project ownership needed to be documented and publicly recognized. No more silent takeovers. No more repackaged ideas wearing new names. Second, I asked for a formal audit of recent promotions and performance reviews. If the system had cracks, we had to find them before more people slipped through, especially women, especially junior staff. Third, I proposed a mentorship and retention program for women in mid-level roles. Most of them didn't leave because they failed. They left because they were tired of screaming into silence. I wasn't going to be another name on that list. Last, I said Martin needed to go, not reshuffled, not retired early, gone. Full severance review, formal acknowledgement of the misconduct, and his name removed from work that wasn't his. There was silence on the line after I finished, but I didn't waver. I told Harold I wouldn't be part of a brand they weren't willing to rebuild from the inside out. 3 days later, I got a call. They agreed to every condition. The audit began immediately. Claire was offered a permanent position, and Martin? He was escorted out the following week, his legacy reduced to what it truly was, a shadow cast over other people's work. I wasn't angry when I saw the memo announcing his departure. I felt nothing but clarity. I didn't win by getting revenge. I won by rewriting the rules. Leadership isn't about being the loudest voice in the room. Sometimes, it's about being the one who refuses to disappear. A few weeks after everything had settled, Claire stopped by my office with that familiar look in her eyes. Calm. Controlled. Like someone who had already done the hard part and was just tying up loose ends. She mentioned a job posting in Denver, a mid-size firm looking for a new VP of strategy. Martin's name had surfaced as a finalist. It didn't surprise either of us. She didn't raise her voice, didn't gloat. She simply said she had forwarded the full file to their executive board, the same one she gave to me, all of it. There was no dramatic pause, No punchline, just a small shrug as she turned to leave. They won't be hiring him. 6 months ago, I walked out of a conference room feeling erased. I had no plan, no allies, and no idea how deeply the system I trusted was built to silence people like me. All I had was a truth I refused to let go of. Today, I lead a team that knows who built the foundation they stand on. I work alongside people who speak up not because they have to, but because the culture finally allows it, and I'm no longer walking alone. The journey wasn't clean, it wasn't fast. But every quiet decision, every ally I didn't expect, every document saved and story shared, it all led here. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just structured.